Good afternoon. This is Matthew Vance again with the Holiness Heritage Sunday School Literature. Just a few minutes late getting started today. I apologize for that. It's supposed to get started around 2 o'clock, and it's 2:10. I'm running a little bit behind. But been a little bit under the weather the last few days. Not COVID. I was COVID tested. Just some kind of, I don't know, something going on here. So, running just a little bit behind, but I apologize. But we're on lesson number 10 today for May the 9th of the Holiness Heritage Sunday School Literature. The lesson is titled The Power of the Eyes. The Power of the Eyes. And the theme, the things we see and look at have a powerful effect on us. What we see affects our heart. Therefore, we must always keep a check on our eyes. Always. Golden text, Proverbs 27:20. Hell and destruction are never full, so the eyes of man are never satisfied. All right, we're going to read a couple different places here, and it seems maybe just a little bit out of order as far as the scripture text. But we're going to take three things from the life of David, not in the chronological order they happened, but three things from the life of David having to do with the eyes and deal with them. So let's read 2 Samuel 11, 1 through 5, and then 1 Samuel 18, 7 through 9, and then Psalm 101 and verse 3. 2 Samuel 11 and 1, and it came to pass after the year was expired, at the time when kings go forth to battle, that David sent Joab and his servants with him and all Israel, and they destroyed the children of Ammon and besieged Rabbah, but David tarried still at Jerusalem. And it came to pass in an eventide that David arose from off his bed and walked upon the roof of the king's house. And from the roof he saw a woman washing herself, and the woman was very beautiful to look upon. And David sent and inquired after the woman, and one said, Is not this Bathsheba, the daughter of Eliam, the wife of Uriah the Hittite? And David sent messengers and took her, and she came in unto him, and he lay with her, for she was purified from her uncleanness, and she returned unto her house. And the woman conceived and sent and told David and said, I am with child. And then we're going to go back to 1 Samuel 18 and 7. And the women answered one another as they played and said, Saul hath slain his thousands, and David his 10,000s. And Saul was very wroth, and the saying displeased him. And he said, They have ascribed unto David 10,000s, and to me they have ascribed but thousands. And what more can he have but the kingdom? And Saul eyed David from that day and forward. And then Psalm 101 and 3. I will set no wicked thing before mine eyes. I hate the work of them that turn aside. It shall not cleave unto me. All right, well, so much can be said about the power of the eyes. Being able to see is a wonderful blessing. I've thought before that if I had to lose one of my senses, even if I had to choose between hearing or even maybe speaking, I think I would want to keep the power of my eyes. I think that would be the one thing that I wouldn't want to lose. If I couldn't hear, they have machines that will type out what you say. If I couldn't speak, I can type out what I want you to hear. But none of that works without the eyes, being able to see, being able to where you go. So they're a blessing, but our eyes can really get us in trouble. Temptation comes so much through our eyes. And that's why there's so much advertising in newspapers, magazines, television, the internet. You got to be able to see the product so you remember it. And people know that. And so we want to look at how the eyes here in relationship to David, different times that the eyes got David in trouble. We got to keep our eyes in the right place. Wandering eyes produce wandering hearts and wandering thoughts. Our eyes are so powerful. They can do so much. We can learn so much. But yet, if we don't keep them sanctified, we're going to get in trouble. Number one, the first section we read there about David, we want to talk about the first point of the lesson, which is looking and lusting. David, time the kings went forth to battle, David stayed at home. David, for whatever reason, he might have been sick, might have had a cold, I don't know. Might have just been tired, might have been getting a little older. I don't really know why, but he stayed at home, and one day in the evening, David got up and walked on the roof of the king's house. And that was a place you'd go up on the roof in the evening, walk and meditate, and the rooftop was really a place of privacy. And people really, you didn't go overlooking in the courtyard of your neighbor, on the roof of your neighbor's house. But there was an expectation of privacy. And I've heard people say that Bathsheba was trying to allure the king. I don't know that, but it was safe to say that David had his eyes in the wrong place. David looks over, and what became an unintentional glance, maybe at first, became an unnecessary gaze. What maybe saw out of the peripheral vision becomes the center of attention. And, you can't stop. You probably heard the phrase, you can't stop a bird from flying over your head, but you can stop him from making a nest in your hair. And when David realized somebody over there taking a bath, he should have walked away. But instead, he identifies it's a woman. She's beautiful. His attention is drawn to her. And through those eyes that have been called the loopholes of lust, the old serpent started working his way into the heart of David. Job 31 and verse 1, Job made the statement that I have made a covenant with mine eyes. Why then should I think upon a maid? Now, I want to tell you, lust and the attraction of the eye is not just for men, but I'm finding more and more that women are being drawn and attracted. Men are being drawn in by their eyes. And David's fall started when he started staring, but it really picked up speed when he started inquiring who she was. Jesus told them in Matthew chapter 5 and verse 27, ye have heard that it was said of them of old time, thou shalt not commit adultery. But I say unto you that whosoever looketh on a woman to lust after her hath committed adultery with her already in his heart. And when David allowed that look that David did soon conceive lust, he left that rooftop. He goes and finds out who she is. He started contemplating. He started thinking about it. Now, David had no business inquiring who this woman was. And when he found out that she was the wife of one of his mighty men that were down in the battle, David didn't stop there, but the Bible said that he sent and he brought her. And David committed that horrible sin of adultery with Bathsheba. It started with his eyes. And that's one of the things I want to talk to you about, the power of the eyes. You have got to learn to control your eyes. And we're going to the third point of this lesson, we're going to deal with some of the areas that the devil uses the eyes to bring that in. David lusted after her. Sin was conceived. Sin brought forth. The child was conceived. And of course we know the end result. That David, what he took his sin and tried to conceal, he ended up having Uriah murdered. He tried to deceive Uriah. He ended up having him killed in the battle. Just one more sin. I can stop after this. I'm just going to look. I'm just going to inquire. I'm just going to commit. I'm just going to try to deceive her husband. I'm just going. But it ends up one more. Because you know what you'll find out? You never can stop with one more sin. And you know what? Just because David was the king did not give him the authority, did not give him the right to have this uncontrolled indulgence in lust. His eyes, he was looking and lusting, and that is one of the power of the eyes that we must guard against. We must guard against. They say that, those in a higher office need to be held to a higher standard. But God's word and God's book holds you to the same standard, no matter how high or how low you are or what your position is. You have got to control your eyes. Now we want to go on to the second story that comes from the life of David. And in this story, it wasn't David that was having problems with his eyes, but it was King Saul. And the second point of the lesson is seeing and seething. Now, first was looking and lusting. Now seeing and seething. David had come back from killing Goliath. He had come back from his great battles as a soldier, a servant under King Saul. He had slaughtered the Philistines, and the women started singing his praises. David had proven himself courageous and faithful, and God had used him. David had a humble attitude. Remember, this is long before his looking and lusting. This is long before he was the king. And God had put his hand on David. And so when God did that, people started to notice. People started to watch. And so the women started singing David's praises. And they started saying that Saul has slain his thousands, but David his 10,000s. And the Bible said that Saul saw this. Saul heard this. Saul saw what was going on. And he began to be angry and jealous and envious of David. Now I want to tell you, when you reach sometimes a period of success, or a time when I had a pastor tell me one time, he said when people in the church see that you're being used or blessed, they're going to get jealous and they're going to try to kill you. He said they're going to try. There are some that as they become a better singer, other singers get jealous. There's some as a deacon in the church, the deacons get jealous. There are others that as the preacher is anointed to preach, there are others that decide they need to take him down. I'm thinking right now of a preacher that had some success, and he had some things in his past, some failures that people were overlooking. But when they saw him having some success, there were some other preachers that got jealous and said, we're going to bring him down. We're going to destroy him. And then they did that very thing. They brought him down. But you know what we need to realize? We need to realize that living for God and working for God is not a one-man show. God chose to use David. David was working for King Saul Saul should have realized that when David won, Saul won. But Saul looked at him and started letting anger rise up inside. He started letting it simmer inside. And the Bible said that Saul eyed David from that day forward. Saul looks at David with a different look than what he had. Now I'll tell you something. God never called investigators in the church. I realize there are some self-called and self-appointed Sherlock Holmeses running around the church, suspicious of everybody and trying to get the dirt on everybody. But from that day forward, Saul eyed David. Saul tried to find some way that he could get the dirt on David. And you know what I found out? When you try to get dirt on somebody else, you're always going to get dirty yourself. You're always going to get filthy yourself. That evil eye of Saul, that eye of envy, that ill will, that malice towards David, the jealousy and the envy and the hatred that sprung out of the eyes of King Saul. He started looking for faults. He started looking for flaws. You know what? David was not disloyal. David was not treasonous. But everything that Saul looked at made it seem that everything David did, he was out to get him. David was just best friends with the king's son. But to Saul, he was trying to undermine him and steal the kingdom. He began to seethe. He began to let it eat at him and stew through the power of his eyes. And if there's anything that'll eat a person alive, it's you getting jealous over somebody else. If there's anything that will make a person forget their goal. Saul was the king. The Philistines were the enemy, not David. David was the one trying to kill the Philistines. David was the one, in one place they even told Saul, who's been more loyal than David? He's been loyal to you. He has been faithful to you. Who has been more faithful than what David has been? But all Saul could see, I'm going to get myself tongue tangled here if I ain't careful. But all Saul could see was what he'd already seen in that jealousy, now tinted. You put on a pair of glasses. I had some sunglasses that had a yellow tint. You know, you got some that are just a little gray, but I had some with yellow tint. And I've even put on a pair that had pink tint, rose colored, and everything you saw was rose colored. And put on those yellow ones, and everything you saw was yellow tinted. But when you allow your eyes to see something, and you allow that film to get over your eyes, it will start to taint everything you do. It will start to taint everything you see. People that don't even mean anything wrong, that they're not trying to be attacking you or malicious to you, but everything they see is tainted by that. And that's what happened to the eyes of Saul. That evil eye of Saul, he eyed him from that day forward. Don't let that happen to you. Don't let that rivalry, don't let that jealousy, don't let that envy get a hold of you, because you will find out that everything that you do will become tainted by it. You won't trust any preacher. You won't trust any deacon. You won't trust anybody's motives. You will allow yourself to do like Saul did, and it'll affect your eyes. Point 3 of the lesson, watching and weakening. And this is from Psalm 101 and verse 3. I will set no wicked thing before mine eyes. I hate the work of them that turn aside. It shall not cleave unto me. And this is really, we're going to talk here a little bit about watching wickedness, watching things, seeing things, reading things. All of what I'm going to say applies to books. Let me tell you something. Holiness people, holiness women don't have any business. Holiness men reading 50 Shades of Grey books. And if you don't know what that is, don't go find out. But you don't have no business reading any of those things. You don't have any business doing that. Television is filled with sex and adultery and violence and crime and cursing and even occultism. And I know there's some that'll argue that, well, there's some good things on there. And I'm sure there are. And there's some good things on the internet. But there's a lot of it that you gotta stay away from. You cannot watch. They in Falls Church, Virginia, some years ago, PTA members decided to watch television programs in the hours that their children might be viewing them after school. They watched 185 programs over 14 and a half hours. And in those 14 and a half hours, they saw 281 assaults, 117 killings, 19 robberies, 16 kidnappings, 10 murder conspiracies, 3 arsons, 3 jailbreaks, a lynching, a bombing, a suicide, plus no doubt countless adulteries and affairs. They watch that and they realize that that is what is being fed to the consumer of America. That is one of the greatest tools. Even, I'm sorry, but there's a little app called TikTok that is full of filth. Probably holiness people ain't got no business on TikTok. I've seen a few people and everything they click on is something vulgar, dirty, nasty. You don't have no business watching that kind of stuff. You don't have no business on the internet watching perversion and filth. And how many young people have been introduced to drugs and alcohol and sex and murder right in their living room? Right in their living room. They watch it day after day and now on their phone. And I know young men, I know a young man that would literally watch pornography on the cell phone bought by the holiness preacher daddy. He would watch pornography sitting in church on the church pew. That influence, that filth that's on there, and you may think it does not affect me. You may think that what I'm seeing does not affect me, that I can watch this. But I would tell you, as you're watching, you're weakening. When David went back and looked over, when Saul looked at David and got angrier by the day, and when you go watch all of this stuff on television and movies and Netflix and on your cell phone and on the internet, when you go watch all of that, you'll find yourself becoming desensitized to sin. You'll laugh at adultery. You'll laugh at affairs. I heard a young man was watching some TV program. This was supposed to be a holiness young man. And on this program there were 2 guys. One of them was a homosexual. The other one wasn't. And the homosexual had a crush on the other one. And this was a holiness young man. He made the statement. He said, "Oh, I hope they get together. They would make such a cute couple. These 2 guys." It will desensitize you by watching that. It And the motive of Hollywood, the motive is to be anti-God, anti-moral, anti-Christian, anti-family, and all of that. U.S. News and World Report asked 500 business, government, professional leaders to rate, in terms of their influence, what is the most influential, the nation's principal organizations and institutions. What has the most influence and effect? And television came in number one. It had more effect on America. It had more effect. Hey, the news, even the news, will have you believing that that conservatism is wrong and liberalism is right. It came ahead of the White House, the Supreme Court, the Congress. It came out ahead of education, and organized religion came in last, 18th, as far as having an effect or an influence upon America. They are trying to push a godless, trying to push a anti-God, anti-religion. America would not be accepting homosexuality today. They would not be accepting a lot of the things that they're accepting had it not been first pumped in through the living room. But it desensitizes, it weakens us. I think of men like David Wilkerson that wrote The Cross and the Switchblade and went to New York City and won so many of the gangs. David Wilkerson made the statement. He was sitting there watching his television, and I'm talking 40 years ago, maybe more. And God said, why are you wasting all this time and not praying? And he started praying. Well, you know what? I believe that if a person would go back to looking unto Jesus, the author and the finisher of our faith, get our eyes fixed on something that's worth watching. Get our eyes fixed on something that's worth, that means something to us. Now, I'm not so foolish to say that anything that moves is a sin. You're watching me online right now. I'm not so foolish to say that anything that moves or has a video is wrong or going to send you to hell. But I am saying there is so much that you better stay away from. There is so much that you better guard yourself against. Because if you're not careful, through the eyes, thoughts are going to come in. Through that affair you saw on TV, you're going to feel like it's okay for you. Through that anger, through that plot, through that murder, through that, you're going to feel like it's okay for you. And what starts out as a small thought, if you're not careful, will dominate your attitude, your character. It'll grow until your eyes consume your life. Now I realize there's so much good out there, and we can't pull our head into a hole in the ground and live in a hole in the ground and say we won't have any internet, we won't have anything that we won't have YouTube, we won't have Facebook, we won't have anything in the world. I realize we can't do that, but I do realize you don't need to look at it if it's wrong. And if you have a problem, you get on and you start surfing, and before long you're looking at something wrong or something questionable, maybe you need to back off and get your eyes back on Jesus. Because the power of the eyes, what a power they have. I want to keep my eyes where they ought to be. All right, Lord bless you. I'm sorry I didn't do maybe as well today as I could have. I'm just feeling a little under the weather. I'll get better, but just feeling a little under the weather. But I want to keep my eyes away from lust, away from envious thoughts, jealousy. And I want to keep my eyes away from the filth of the world. Because when I look at that, eventually I'll become that. All right, Lord bless you. Thank you for watching. You have a good day.